In this video, we're going to go over the installation of the silicone dust boots onto a standard X-Maxx drive shaft. There's 4 of these on the truck, and our sets of silicone dust boots are available as both just the inner ones, where you get 4 of these, and would install them on this end of the shaft. Also available separately, you can just buy the outer ones, which will come with a set of 4 boots and 4 retaining rings, or as a complete set if you want to do all the axles on both ends and have matching boots everywhere. So the first step, of course, is to get the axle out of the truck. There's plenty of guides on how to do that, so I'm not going to go into detail on extracting the axles from the truck. Step 2 is clean them. Most people purchase these boots because they are trying to keep dirt out of the axles, or they're trying to add grease into these joints. So to do that, you will have to first clean the both ends of the axle, and I would suggest actually popping the outside joint apart and giving that a good cleaning. Mine is not quite clean, but this is for demonstration purposes only. Another item to check is whether your outdrives, and this is a Revo 2 outdrive that would fit on the differential, but the concept is the same. Check whether these slots on your truck have any ridges or burrs that have formed from the axles sliding through on metal. If you have any burrs, use a metal file or some sandpaper to clean them up, round them over, remove them, because if you install a boot onto those sharp edges, the boot is going to get cut up. In fact, you can even cut yourself occasionally if you're working on your truck and those burrs get bad enough, you can slice your finger open. So keep an eye on that. Happens to the vast majority of outdrives that use this type of drive system. The other place where sharp burrs may end up forming is inside the outboard CV joint. The slot here is also experiencing metal-on-metal contact with a pin, and if you do find that you have burrs here, while you're cleaning the axle, you may as well take some sandpaper or a file and knock those off. Your fingers will thank you, and if you decide to install the boot over this end by pulling it over the rounded part of the axle, removing those burrs will also ensure that you're not going to cut the boot in the process of pulling it onto the axle. My personal preference is actually to install both boots from the inboard side of the axle. So once you have cleaned your axle and you're ready for the boot installation, the first step is to grab your inboard boot and work it over the pins of the inboard side of the axle. This is, and make sure it goes on the right way. This is the outboard boot, so it has to go this way. So notice one pin first, and then just with your fingers stretch the narrow end of the boot around the rounded part of the shaft, and then kind of give it a little bit of a pinch and get it over the rest of the axle. There's a little flashing here, but that's not from the me sliding it over. That's just from the boot manufacturing process. So now you've managed to get it across the pin. Get it all the way to the end of the shaft. So now that you have the boot installed onto the axle, the next step is to slide it all the way over the stub axle and try to get it on as far as possible. This will allow you to install the retaining ring much more easily. It is also important to note that the boot has to fit all the way against the retaining ring. There's a little ledge inside and the boot has to butt up all the way against it. This will ensure that all of the ridges inside engage with the boot correctly and that it doesn't bind up when you try to install it. The ring is fairly thin, and you can flex it slightly if it helps you get the boot pushed into it. Yeah, no rush, just work it all the way on, and look into the little gap between the ring and the stub axle and just check all around that the boot has slid all the way into the ring. Once you're sure of that, you are ready to start pulling the boot in small increments back, which will take the ring with it, and basically the whole assembly will slide down the stub axle to a point where it will be friction locked onto the stub axle. It's important to do this evenly and kind of work your way around, maybe rotate 45 degrees or 90 degrees around the axle, and just tug and rotate. The boot will become thinner as you pull on it, which will allow it to actually move, and it'll relieve some of the friction by becoming thinner. And once it actually moves into final position and you release it, it'll actually lock itself in place. Now this can be a little tricky because the stub axle is free to move, and you can correct small unevenness by holding the stub axle and pulling the part that is not sliding on in small increments down to make it even again. It is best, however, to pinch on opposite sides so that it just goes on evenly, and try to control the wobbling axle in the process. If you feel like it's just stuck and it's all lopsided, you can always back it back off and restart. That's better than tearing a boot during installation. Notice we are making progress. You can start seeing the innermost lip on the stub axle already. So the boot is actually sliding on slowly. And there it is, starting to emerge. This is where the bearing would sit on the stub axle, so we're making incremental progress as we go along. Toward the end, right about now, it actually starts getting easier because the ring and the boot are arriving at the final resting place where they will be locked in, and this is where all the tolerances are just basically perfect for that boot to stay on. Notice at this point, when you're done, you'll feel that the ring is pretty much locked solid. It will not have any rubbery feeling to it because there's no further room left to go. It's arrived at its final position. If you continue pulling on it, you will likely just pull the boot out. However, it is held in there very firmly. Normal use will not pull this boot out of the ring. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. If you ever need to pull the boot off, you can just work the ring off the boot, and then the boot can come off pretty easily. So we'll do this one more time, just with minimal commentary. Boot all the way on as far as it'll go. Put the ring onto the boot until the boot is all the way up against this flat lip on the inside edge of the ring, and then pull it back while while working your way around the axle. Straighten it out if it gets a little crooked. Try to catch that before it becomes a catastrophe. And I'm doing this fairly quickly, but keep in mind I do this frequently. Going slow is not a bad thing. You know, see it, it's starting to move a little more easily. Every tug actually produces more movement because it's getting to its final position. And it has arrived at its final position on the axle. So that's the inboard. This is the outboard boot. If you choose to put grease in these, try to make sure the grease does not get on the outside edges of the stub axle, because again, friction is what we rely on to keep the boot in place. Any grease would make that a lot more difficult. The boot will not want to stay on. If you do get grease on the outside, just wipe it off with some alcohol and keep it as free of oil and grease as possible. Now on the inboard end, this is a lot easier to install. There's actually a small trick you can do. Take the boot and invert it, turn it inside out. This will make it a lot easier to push the axle through it. The process is the same as the outside. One pin through the hole, and then just stretch over the axle. Kind of pinch out a little bit and stretch, and then pinch again and stretch. And now that it's on, but inside out, you can flip it back over and it's ready to be installed over the differential outdrive. These pockets here, they're white spots on the boot, they go over the pin. The pin protrudes slightly when installed in the drive cups, so you want to position these over the pins so they don't tear up the boot when they are moving through the drive cup. And the axle is ready to go back on the truck. You can add grease on this end as well, keeping in mind again that you want to make sure that the surfaces where this part of the boot, the inside, is going to be contacting are free of grease, because they use friction as well to stay on. If you have any questions, you can always reach us by email or on eBay, wherever you've purchased our products. We will offer advice, support, and we have replacement parts that we will gladly send you if you run into issues or have an installation mishap. We support our customers all the way. Thank you for watching, and thank you for any feedback that you may have.